Let me say, first of all, thank you to 100 Years and to Barb and the team here for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's the first of a kind of exploration of how to do these things. And essentially, I've developed this kind of methodology called 24 Hours to Massive Change. And it's basically 24 principles that really you can use to design your life and work. And that's going to be the focus of what we're going to do today. We're going to look at one of those principles. So we're going to take one of those principles and kind of unpack it as a concept that we can apply to all sorts of things. And when I think about design, I don't think about visual things necessarily, although visual things are one of the outcomes of design. The real purpose of design is to produce desired outcomes, whether those are objects and products and visual things, or results like political action and social accomplishment. So all of these things are actually designed accomplishments, designed outcomes, if you apply the right kind of thinking to the process. So today we're going to look at Sketch. And the concept really is, hey everybody, let's fail. And it's typically contrary to business, it's contrary to education, it's contrary to success for most people, that when they talk about failure, they don't want to be included in that discussion. They don't want to be a part of that club. But as designers, as design thinkers, the relationship that we have with failure is that we bring it close rather than pushing it away. Even though we're in a culture that pushes it away and tries to say, for God's sakes, don't fail. Designers have the opposite approach, is to say, let's fail lots, let's fail quickly, and let's fail as an exploration of ideas. So that's what we really want to think about when we think about Sketch. And Sketch is really the way that we do it. So we still think about sketching mostly as a visual practice too, but what you can see is that actually you can sketch all kinds of things, and you're going to see some of that today. So when I think about what is the kind of, what's at the core of design practice, it's this idea of failing fast, that the ability to actually have ideas quickly and have them inexpensively and explore them freely. That's really the core of design and design practice for me. So, and what we see is that when we don't do that, we end up failing big. So when I see failures that are really kind of, like the website for healthcare, that's a failure to design freely. Instead of exploring lots of things quickly, instead of using the full kind of capacity of creative thinking, they locked in on something really early, and it's been a disaster. So that's a kind of example of non-design. They didn't apply this kind of thinking to the outcome that they were trying to produce. Now, when I think about design as a kind of way of living, I think it's a learning method. It's actually really about what you don't know. It's not about what we already know. Like almost every question I answer, people don't know the answer to it. What we're asked to do is develop answers to questions that are not answerable. Otherwise, they would not have us involved. So this idea that we are developing a practice of learning and doing what we don't know how to do. That's the constant in our design practice. The constant in our practice is we don't know how to do this. It's a kind of weird thing that we sell to people, that people show up and ask us to do things that we don't know how to do. But that's really the practice, and it means that you actually have to design a space for failing safely. You need a way of having this kind of experience and knowing that you're going to be okay. That you can have ideas and know that you're not going to fall off a cliff if it's a bad one. You're not going to fall out of the tree. You might get a bit scraped up and you might be a few branches down, but you're going to be okay. And so part of that is actually understanding that it's a methodology and that failure is perfectly okay, and developing a kind of method around that. So if you think about it as a business method, it's unlike almost every other business practice. Almost every business practice is about expertise and success and efficiency. It's about knowing what to do and doing it repeatedly and being able to be an expert in that thing. As designers, on the contrary, we're comfortable not knowing that. We're comfortable with a practice that we're going to fail a lot in order to get to success. So, the kind of question that I ask is this question: which would you be more comfortable with, trial and error or error and trial? And I usually choose trial and error. So when I think about design, I say my design starts with stupid. Right? My design hat is a dunce cap. I don't know how to do this. That's the posture I have to take, and it's challenging because people are not comfortable with that for the most part. It takes some kind of character, but also some practice and discipline to say, I'm going to be okay not knowing what to do, and in that process, discover the real opportunity. Now, I had an incredible experience with working with Frank Gehry's office on a project one time, and we were working with a big client. They all came down to the studio to talk about doing a big project, and everyone was super excited. This whole team, they had like 20 people. They were really super excited, except for one person. And you could see the guy was kind of moping around the whole time. They were doing a kind of tour of the studio. He was kind of moping around, and he was really anxious, about his approach. And finally, in the meeting, he said, "Look, I understand everyone's very excited to be here, and it's clear that the creative work is really amazing, but I have no idea why we're here. I've worked with designers who do nothing but retail design. This is a retail client. That all they do is think about how retail works and the experience of retail and the technology of retail and the changes in retail. That's all they do. Why are we working with you? You don't know anything about this." and I thought, wow, that's a pretty amazing assertion, and it's really true. I mean, we were in no way experts in retail. But Jim Glimpf, who worked with Frank at the time, had this to say. He said, if you want to know how it's done, get people who know, experts. If you want to know how it should be done, how it could be done, how it might be done in the future, you came to the right place, designers. Because we don't know, we'll learn your business more rigorously and deeply than any expert ever will. They don't need to learn, they already know. And I thought, wow, that's the best explanation I've ever heard of the design approach that we take, the sketching approach. That ultimately it's about trying things and exploring things. And because we don't know, we're willing to go places that the people who do know would never go. Now, Thomas Edison said that he doesn't consider failure a waste of time or money because a failure confirms what you're not going to do to succeed. So it closes a door. So his approach was, let's open all the doors we can, and we'll close the doors when they fail. And eventually we're going to find the door that leads us to what we want to accomplish. And that's really a sketching model. That's a sketching model, an idea of failing fast. And that's why we sketch. So the approach that I want to introduce is this. It's rough and loose, free and fast, will get us results that last and last. So to get real success, you have to start rough. You have to start with failure. And no amount of expertise will get you to that without the first steps, without the wild bit. So you're not going to get, because what you're going to do, if you only want to do this, you'll only do what we already know, which is already done and it's already owned by someone. So you're never going to accomplish anything that way. So sketching is really a practice. It's a way of living. It's like meditation. Now you need to learn it to do it, but more importantly, you need to do it to learn it. So we mostly think we can't do it, and you said you can't draw. Who else would say they can't draw here? In my experience, if you actually have to do what we're going to do, you'll see that you can draw. And if you think about your life, you started out drawing. Every child knows how to do it. We teach them how not to do it, and then we teach them that they can't do it. And it's a tragedy, in my view. So we need to practice it. So you need to develop a methodology and a kind of practice of sketching in the same way that you have a methodology and practice of meditation or thoughtfulness or mindfulness. And this concept that practice makes imperfect, that you actually have to develop a willingness to be bad. And most people are not, we've been so ingrained in not doing that, and saying, don't be bad, be good, be great, be excellent, be perfect. That's our culture. But we have to actually develop a methodology of being bad in order to be free, in order to be great. So let's do some sketching. I want to go through a few what I consider kind of secrets of how to do this. The first secret is swallow your pride. Perfect is the enemy of good. I love this expression. I say it all the time because I suffer from it terribly. I'm a design freak. I'm a control freak. I'm a designer. I want things my way, always. So I'm always trying to order things, arrange things, make things right. I never leave the cutlery on the table the way it's put there. I put it my way. Everything I do, I do that. But when you're thinking, that's the enemy of accomplishment. You have to get yourself to say, okay, I'm going to be bad. Allow yourself to do bad ideas, obvious ideas, weird things that clearly won't work, or that we don't know how to do yet. Ways of just doing things that no one's done. We don't know how to do it. We don't know how to accomplish it. But it's an interesting idea. If every sketch has to demonstrate your genius, the pressure will prevent you from exploring developments that might be the invention you need. In other words, if you have to demonstrate your good quality every time you touch the paper, you end up not doing anything because it'll prevent you. The second secret of sketching is to understand what you're trying to capture and where you are in the process. So this is something that I do all the time. I try to understand, how zoomed in are we? Where am I in a kind of arc of a project, or an arc of something that we're trying to do? At this point in time, when you're sketching, it's gesture, not detail. It's idea, not form. You don't have to worry about, what color or shape or exactly. It's like, what's the big idea? What's the gesture? And what's the relationship? If you think about what diagrams are, almost everyone I know knows how to make a pie chart. That's a sketch. It's a sketch of a relationship. So if I draw a pie chart and I put a quarter out of it, you can easily say that's a quarter of that whole. That's a sketch. So that's what we're trying to do. Don't try to do too much. We'll put the details in later. So at this point in a process, at a sketching process, you're thinking about big picture, not that kind of detail. The third secret is iteration, more and more, over and over. This idea that voluptuous production, more. This separates the great designers from everybody else. No designer that I really love ever pops it out fully formed. They all do some version of this process. They create voluptuously and make a lot of things. And the fact that you're going to make a lot of things allows you to mess around and do stuff that, it doesn't have to be the ideal perfection because you're going to iterate. So let's try it. I think so many of the things that we all think, when we look at them, we think, wow, that just is beautiful. We have the impression that it actually just came out like that. But in fact, it went through this kind of through this kind of process. And remember that sketching is cheap. With a pencil and paper, you can change the world. We can have an idea on pencil paper, for nothing, and completely change the way that people live. And if you think about this as in a business context, there's a good reason that a lot of design practice happens independently of business. Because inside of business, it's really hard to sustain this kind of obviously wasteful activity. Because you're playing, you're creating things, you're doing stuff and throwing it away. Even the designers themselves find it wasteful. I remember once working with a young designer, and he did a big, working on a book, and he did a big section of the book, and the moment that he presented it, I realized what we should be doing, which was an altogether different approach. And a few hours later, I walked outside the studio, and he was sitting there, and I said, and he looked really glum, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "Well, I can't believe you just did that." And I said, "Did what?" He said, "Well, you threw away all that work." And I said, "That's the idea. That's the idea. That's how you get to great, is you throw it away. You throw it away. It's a sketch, throw it away. You can't get to the great stuff except by traversing through these ideas." So the challenge of a business practice is to turn to turn it over as quickly and as many times as possible. If you think about how many times can I iterate this thing before I go live, that's what we want to accomplish. So let's do some sketching. You all have sketch paper, and you have these really thick pens. And there's a reason for a really thick pen. The thick pen basically prevents you from being good. So, so no matter how good you are, it will be very hard to do a good drawing with a pen that thick on a paper that small. So I'm going to strike a pose. And now you sketch it. Okay, you got a very short amount of time. This is Usain Bolt. You might recognize it. Okay. Okay, so when you have them finished, just put them up here. Okay, now what's the worst sketch here? What you'll see is there isn't really a bad sketch here. Right? There are two things that I want to see here. One is that you instantaneously get half a dozen takes on an idea. Right? So you get, in 1 minute, you get a bunch of ways of seeing it. Right? So it's a really fast, smart way of using a group. To say, let's sketch and see a range of ideas. But also you see that basically everyone got it. Everyone got the big idea. You can see the gesture in every one of them. So the worst one is excellent. So it turns out that you all can draw, contrary to what you imagine. And that, for me, is the kind of light bulb that we want shining up here. Right? That in the end, we have the capacity to do it. We started doing this. Right? We started as kids doing this. And ultimately, this is what sketching is about. It's about capturing a concept quickly. It's not about being able to draw a painting of a landscape or a person in perfect. That is a skill, and it's a very specific and wonderful skill. But it's not a design skill. Right? A design skill is a sketch. Right? Now, I want you to do another one of me, but I want you to exaggerate me. Right? So, I just ask that you be kind. Okay, that's enough time. Let's put them up. Very nice. So again, you see how exaggeration as an idea is a wonderful idea because it's basically clarity. Right? What you're doing is taking one thing and foregrounding it. Right? Every client that I've ever worked for is seeking that result. They want a foreground clarity against a noisy background. So this kind of ability to say, let's take one idea and clarify it, is a sketching idea. And you can see that it's a really powerful way. And I mean, even though these are super diverse, I recognize myself in all of them. You know, some more than others. But you can see that we can produce a diversity and clarity in that quick process. Now let's do it blindfolded. So put your blindfolds on. And what we're going to do is actually turn off one of your senses. Like if you think about the world that you live in, it's dominated by the visual. The greatest allocation of your brain is to the visual. So when you turn that off, you open up other channels. You know, people talk about, when people are, when they have catastrophic accidents and they lose their sight, they talk about how they, over time, develop the capacity to use other senses that they had not really, had never really kind of been in touch with. And by the same token, people who get sight restored often are kind of horrified at first at how difficult it is to actually process that information because their brain didn't assign that brain power to that problem. So putting on a blindfold is a way of, and just turning off one of the senses is a way of seeing in a new way. And that's one of the great challenges of creative work. It's one of the great challenges of design and of sketching. So let's start with a drawing of a car. And don't do anything to make it look too good. And no cheating. It's really amazing. You are a very talented group. I must say, you're even better with your blindfolds on. Okay, a camel. We have some extraordinary artists in our midst today. And finally, yourself. Okay, so let's put me away. Uh-oh. Let's take the blindfolds off and have a look. So let's put the Nice. Okay, let's put them up here. Let's put them up.
That's not bad. This is neat.
Put them close together because we're going to cut a lot. Right?
Like that?
Yeah.
It's like a country.
Cheating. Oh my goodness. No, can't compete there.
Oh my god.
Is it the car or camera?
Wow, nice. Gosh, you're really good.
Mark, that's so good.
Right?
No, that's the one more. Thank you.
Very nice.
I like that.
Now these are beautiful. Now what you're really counting on is a kind of iconography that we all share. Right? So you reduce the camel to an important idea. Right? Right? There's a common element in all the camels. Right? So the other things are all there, but the defining factor is a couple of humps. And so you're thinking about what is a common language that we share. And that's part of sketching. So part of it is actually using what is fast and recognizable to suggest something that people might already have a familiarity with. Okay. But again, you can see that it's incredibly diverse, and we all know how to do it. Like there isn't anybody here who couldn't do it. And they're all pretty darn good, considering you're blindfolded. So, if you think about what this is, right? Like a sketch is really a prototype. It's a way of seeing something, right, quickly, and that's a common denominator in everything that we're trying to do. And everything that we're trying to do, we're trying to be able to see it, and see it quickly, and see it in different ways. Right? So in just this few minutes, we're able to see these ideas in a kind of diversity of ways that would be, really challenging to produce otherwise. So if you think about what a prototype is, it really, it's from the Greek primitive form, first impression, first model. Right? That's the source of it, and that's what a sketch really is. Right? It's that kind of first model of something. And they are, I think, the kind of dirty little secret of design. If you think about, the impression that we leave. I mean, I had this same impression about a lot of other practices. When I thought about being an author, when I read books, I thought, I can't possibly write like that. Well, the reality is that they can't write like that either. They write like this, and then they keep working on it. They write a sketch, and then they keep working on it. And they end up with Graham Greene's novel. They end up at a great place because they were willing to do a sketch and had the freedom to kind of think about it openly. And that's what we have as designers. We have that ability to get to things that are perfectly formed, but we actually have this kind of messy fun to begin with. Now the bad news is that it's really a lot of work to do, because you got to do a lot of them. The good news is that practically anyone can do it. Like when you think about this as a methodology, anyone can figure out how to do this if you take this approach. And the real big idea that comes out of that is that you have the power to change the world. That if you can do this, you can create an idea that will change the way that people live and work. That's what that really comes down to. Now, as I mentioned, we all start out in life knowing how to do it. Like every child that I've ever encountered, they take a pen and the first thing they do, they start making things happen on the page. Unfortunately, much of our educational system is about doing things in a certain way. And so we insist that they do it according to a certain approach. And what we mostly teach them is that they can't do it. And then finally, we are all convinced that we can't do it at all. But in fact, if you think about how all the innovators that I know, they all have sketching in the core of their practice. That if you think about my daughters and Leonardo da Vinci, basically draw like this. Like they do things over and over again. They look at it over and over again. They do this. Right? They do this. They're constantly kind of exploring it as a way of exploring ideas. So they're sketching it as a way of understanding it. Klaus Oldenburg, his whole life, from a very young age, he got a big box of little tiny notebooks, and he filled up all those notebooks, and so he made hundreds more. And his whole life, he's captured his ideas in what he calls notebook pages. These little kind of drawings that are just like this, that are very much like this, in this kind of spirit, that just capture an idea, so that as he works, he can keep all that as kind of ways of thinking about what he might be doing. Frank sketches in pencil and in blocks of all kinds. He thinks about, he starts with sketching, pencil sketching or pen sketching, but that sketching practice actually follows through the whole process. So it's not like the sketch happens and then the building happens. They're actually sketching the program. So they're sketching the relationship of activities and how those activities all fit together. They're sketching the material. They're sketching the organization of the building. They're sketching everything about it. It's a kind of more and more refined iterations all the way to the final building. And I know Frank has talked many times about how his real kind of a creative objective is to make the building feel like a sketch, to be a sketch, that it has the energy that this does. Because if you think about this, very, very few pieces of work have this kind of, this kind of clear energy. You think most buildings you look at, they're dead compared to this. Right? And that's his practice is all about trying to figure that out. Dean Kamen sketches in stainless steel. One of the things that Dean talks about is his father was a quite famous artist who did the comic books Tales from the Crypt. Right? Amazing artist. And as a kid, Dean said, I used to spend time with my dad, and every drawing that he did was perfect. And mine were always bad. And so I just decided I would never draw. And he said, I sketch in stainless steel. I just make it as a sketch. So these are all prototypes for the Segway and the wheelchair that he did. And they're really, he sees them as a sketch. In the way that we do something like this. He has a fully kitted out machine shop in his basement. He just goes down there at night and makes it in a CNC cutter and sketches it in stainless steel. If you think about what happened with Disneyland, the first drawing, the design of Disneyland as a sketch, was drawn in a weekend. And it was sketched for investors. Walt said, Walt came into the studio and said, I've got to get this done. I got a meeting with investors. I need a sketch that shows what this could be like. And that was done in a weekend, and 48 hours later, you had Disneyland. And think about it, what, like billions of dollars and an amazing cultural impact later. It's quite extraordinary. And if you think about sketching and prototypes, even final products can be sketches. Like everything now is in constant development. So even a finished product is actually a sketch of future generations. So all of these cars are all in the market, but they're really prototypes of a new era. So they are themselves kind of sketches of what is to come. And now there's a revolution of prototyping taking place. 3D printers put the power of sketching into the hands of millions of people. And we're starting to see these kinds of things. So this is a building prototype. And you think, well, they can only do it this big, it's not really that important. But actually, they're now moving to make them at building size. So you can see they're starting to print out products at this kind of big scale. And this is all part of a new culture of sketching, that we have the ability to be creative and express that and make that part of the way that we live. And it goes all the way to this device that is actually a 3D printer for burritos. So if you need a burrito printed out, it'll print out your sketch of a burrito. So with that, I'm going to close with the idea that sketching is a practice, that ultimately we have to develop a way of doing this on a daily basis and making it part of the way that we live our creative life. Thank you.